Here in studio, Mr. Dan Perry, international affairs analyst. Mr. Perry, how do we break the deadlock? Perhaps we forgot about the most, I wouldn't say intuitive option, but the easiest option, perhaps, that includes the least amount of moving elements.
Thank you for setting that up.
Yeah,
yes. Everyone talks about two scenarios. One in which Israel invades Rafah, which is set to be a bloodbath for sure, because there's almost 1.5 million people in a tiny area, and it'll be about as ugly can get. And the other is Israel accepts Hamas's condition of ending the war, which means leaving Hamas in power in Gaza, which in the twisted calculus of Middle Eastern geopolitics is a victory for jihadism. And I don't think Israel's ever going to agree to that. There is a third option, which is Hamas surrendering. Now, can you imagine any other political leadership in the world faced with this situation where it's clear they're not going to prevail militarily, and with the enemy, in this case Israel, primed to go in, and legitimate fears that they're going to lose huge amounts of their civilian population, and they have no hope of actually winning? Who else wouldn't consider surrendering? Israel would surrender. Hitler committed suicide in the bunker. The idea that they have to hold out, no matter the cost, to their own people reflects a fundamental sickness that I would like to see the Arab world call out. Why on earth is the Arab League not calling on Hamas to lay down its arms and allow the PA to take over the Gaza Strip from which it was stolen? Which was stolen from the PA in 2007.
Well,
indeed, why does the West not issue that call more clearly, not pressure the Arab countries, not pressure Qatar, who I don't think wants its global brand to be forever attached to bloodthirsty jihadi terrorists who have brought a cataclysm upon the people of Gaza? I think we're at a point where a reboot is possible. Now, what's standing in the way of that reboot? Really, if the Arab world was willing to do this, what would they require? Clearly, they'd require Netanyahu and the government to say, yes, we obviously understand that the least bad option, with all the difficulties, with all the need for a rejuvenation and an improvement and a changing of the curriculum, educational curricula for students, which is indeed bad, yeah, is the PA. We understand that, and that is our horizon. He doesn't do that. For political reasons having to do with his dependence, the dependency of his coalition on the far right in Israel, and the fact that he doesn't prevents this more logical scenario from gaining momentum internationally, and feeds suspicion that the Prime Minister in particular has an interest in the war prolonging forever because he has political challenges in Israel. We saw a poll today that showed the opposition plus the Arab parties getting 2/3 of the vote. And a majority of, absolute majority wanting new elections now in the middle of a war, despite the strong instinct in Israel that you shouldn't do politics in the middle of a war. Netanyahu's situation is desperate, and he's acting like a desperate man, and that is devastating to Israel's security outlook and strategic position in this conflict.
But should Jerusalem say, all right, the PA is the least worst option at this point in time, would that diffuse this tangled web of different interests? Would that be enough to push Hamas to surrender, not Israel, but rather its Arab backers?
I don't even see the different interests, frankly. The Arab countries, I have a dream, and in my dream, the Arab countries are useful and transparent and honest with their own people. They don't want Hamas to stay in power in Gaza. They do want the PA to be restored in Gaza. PA is far from perfect. It's a mediocre semi-government full of corruption and a lot of nonsense and things that I would demand be changed immediately, but they are the least bad option.
Yeah.
And an adult understands that you can't always get what you want, and sometimes you have to choose from among imperfect options. And naysayers and infantile players and bad faith players will always say, well, it's bad, to which the answer is it's the least bad. Now, if we don't choose the least bad option to find a way to break this impasse, we are headed towards a cataclysm here.
Well, you can't always get what you want. That was a campaign song not so long ago. Hijacked this song by this.
You can't argue with the Rolling Stones.
Right, yeah, exactly. But speaking of the lesser of evil or the least bad option, the IDF, the Shin Bet Security Service, say they have uncovered Hamas tunnels system passing under a building that serves as UNRWA's central headquarters. UNRWA is saying we didn't know.
It's a little pitiful at this point. Either UNRWA is incredibly stupid, or
which is terrible.
Which it suggests lack of competency in educating Palestinian children and distributing it, or they turn a blind eye. And at the end of the day, it's difficult to be too angry with people who didn't get the courage to stand up to a murderous mafia.
I beg to differ.
No, of course they should have said something, but you understand their difficult spot.
Of course.
And I think, look, the question now, really, is do you destroy UNRWA and leave Israel in charge of distributing aid to millions of people? Or do you try to revive it? If, politically the UNRWA brand is very much damaged, so rename it, because it's a silly name anyway with the relief and works. You can find a different name. But some UN body to fulfill that function,
but if,
hopefully not run by stupid people or complicit people, is maybe necessary.
But when we hear UN officials, not a few weeks ago, not in the immediate aftermath of October 7th, now a special envoy to the Palestinian territories from the UN Security Council, from the UN Human Rights Council, is saying the victims of October 7th were not murdered because they were Jews, but as a response to the American oppression. This is a UN official saying that today.
But if there can be a UN body more discredited than UNRWA, it's the one you just mentioned.
It's a Human Rights Council.
Which variously has been overseen by regimes whose primary field of excellence is the oppression of their own populations and the trampling of human rights. The hypocrisy across the UN system is legion and truly tragicomic. But on occasion, UN bodies do play a function that is necessary. And we mentioned before the least bad option.
Yeah.
I would say the least bad option is a reconstituted and renamed UNRWA, because some version of those things has to be done. Putting aside that UNRWA does attach to the nonsensical notion of a forever Palestinian, hereditary Palestinian refugee status, but that whole thing needs to be fixed in a region-wide reboot. Do you know that in Lebanon, people who are third and fourth generation in Lebanon, because their parents came from a few miles south, so Palestinians don't have citizenship, are denied basic rights, don't have the same educational system, are hampered in their property rights and their access to work because they're Palestinians, and realistically they're Lebanese Sunnis.
Yeah.
They're Sunni Lebanese. They're not in some far-off country, forced to live among an alien people. They share the same branch of the same religion, the same version of Arabic they speak, and they're born in Lebanon, fourth generation now. I'm not saying an aspiration to return to Palestine is, I wouldn't begrudge them that, but the idea that they're truly refugees is preposterous. And UNRWA is part of a structure that has kept them in that status. In some cases, Arabic countries, Syria, literally forcing them to stay in camps. Yeah. But the camps have become shanty towns.
So for Iranians, there are many different opinions on Iran. Many, many of us can be critical of Israel's current war in Gaza, or have sort of a variety of opinions on it. But by and large, they agree that the kind of support Iran has had for these militias in the region has not meant anything good for Iran, and that's why this policy is so unpopular.
Mr. Dan Perry here in the studio.
I wanted to thank you that at this moment of nothing but bad news, you provide among the most positive outlooks I've heard, and about Iran, of all places. I really hope you're right, that after Khamenei, they will change their policies. But how profound will that be? I mean, are they really going to drop the axis of resistance? Might Iran actually democratize, in your view?
Democratization is something that we struggle for. Many of us in Iran have struggled for a very long time, and will continue to do so. Iranian civil society movement, in this my new book that sort of came out last week, is all about the variety and the sort of richness of a variety of women's movements, trade unions that are fighting for democratization in Iran. But even before they can get somewhere, even before we can have democratization, which I sort of hope and that will one day come. But even before democratization, there will be a change in direction because, the kind of destructive anti-Israel and anti-American policy just doesn't serve anyone.
Senior lecturer at the Clemson University, Arash Azizi, thank you as always for your time. Author, of course, of What Iranians Want. Thank you very much for this. Dan Perry, before we wrap it up, Biden Netanyahu, it's a rocky relationship, and it seems that at least at this point in time, at this hour of the day, it's on the downside.
I think never has an American president been happier to see the coming of Ramadan early. Because even Netanyahu seems to understand that it would be better for this to wind down before mid-March when Ramadan comes this year. Biden can't afford the continuation.
If not Christmas, then Ramadan.
Well,
some
Christmas
holiday
will be
will have
about a month too late.
Yeah.
This war has become a wedge issue in the U.S. to a degree that is unhealthy to Biden's electoral prospects. Because, of course, if he continues supporting Israel as he has, he loses the progressive youth and the minorities, and Michigan's a problem there. And the other way lie problems with some of the Jews. And look, this becomes the world's problem. For many people in the world, if this war in Gaza ends up getting Trump returned to the White House, then Israel will have a kind of blame attached to it by the Europeans and others that will not serve it well.
Well, with NATO and Russia and all these topics taking center stage in the Trump campaign for the time being, maybe not Israel.
By the way, that entire panoply, the only people who would be happy to have that assist from Israel in this regard is, of course, the Russians.
All right, to be continued. Dan Perry, thank you very much, as always, for joining us. And this is it from us for today.